The metal doors of the conference room hissed open aboard the United Earth defense vessel Resolute. Captain James Miller straightened his uniform one last time before stepping through. This was humanity's first official meeting with the Stellar Coalition, and everything had to be perfect. The aliens were already seated around the large oval table, their tall, slender forms wrapped in shimmering ceremonial robes that seemed to catch every bit of light in the room. Ambassador Vram sat at the head of the table, his silvery skin reflecting the soft glow of the ship's lighting. "Welcome, Captain Miller," Vram said, his translator converting the musical tones into English. "We are eager to begin our evaluation of Earth's readiness to join the galactic community." Miller took his seat, flanked by his weapons officer Tom Reed and diplomatic advisor Maria West. The weight of his standard-issue sidearm pressed against his hip, a comfort he'd grown used to over 20 years of service. "We appreciate the Coalition's interest in Earth," Miller replied carefully. "We have prepared detailed reports on our technological capabilities and defensive systems." Reed activated the holographic display, showing various Earth vessels and weapon systems. As the presentation continued, Miller noticed the slight twitches in the aliens' expressions. They were trying to hide it, but he could see the growing looks of disdain. Ambassador Vram raised a hand, interrupting the presentation. "Forgive me, Captain, but are these truly your most advanced weapon systems?" His tone carried barely concealed amusement. "They are," Miller answered firmly. "Our railgun technology has proven highly effective in—" A burst of musical laughter filled the room as one of the junior coalition members failed to contain himself. "They still use physical projectiles, like throwing rocks at each other." Vram shot his subordinate a stern look, but his own lips twitched with poorly hidden mirth. "What my colleague means, Captain, is that such weapons are quite primitive by Coalition standards. We haven't used kinetic weapons in over 5 centuries. Energy-based weapons are far more civilized." Miller watched as they activated their own display, showing sleek ships firing brilliant beams of plasma and laser weapons. The Coalition vessels were protected by shimmering energy shields that rippled like water whenever they were hit. But something caught Miller's eye. Each time a shot impacted the shields, there was a distinct pattern to the energy dispersion. He'd seen something similar during his early days testing shield systems, if he was right. "Impressive technology," Miller said diplomatically, even as the Coalition members continued to exchange amused glances. "We look forward to learning from your advanced civilization." "Yes, you have much to learn," Vram agreed, his condescension now obvious. "Your chemical propulsion weapons are charming, in their way, a reminder of how far we've all come. Though you might want to update your armament before attempting any serious space combat." More subtle laughter rippled through the Coalition delegation. Miller kept his face neutral, but his mind was racing. He'd need to speak with the weapons development team as soon as this meeting was over. There was something about those shields, something that might prove very important if the Coalition's friendly facade ever dropped. "We appreciate your candid assessment," Miller said, catching the worried glances from his own team. They didn't like being laughed at, but he kept them calm with a subtle hand gesture. Let the Coalition underestimate them. Let them think humanity was stuck in the past with their primitive weapons. The meeting continued for another hour, with the Coalition representatives barely containing their amusement at each piece of human technology displayed. When it finally ended, Miller was the last to leave the conference room. He paused at the doorway, looking back at the now empty chairs where the aliens had sat. "Laugh all you want," he muttered under his breath, "but I've got a feeling our primitive guns might surprise you someday." He headed straight for the ship's communication room. He needed to contact Dr. Anna Thompson back at the Weapons Research Facility on Earth. If his hunch about those shield harmonics was right, humanity's outdated weapons might just prove to be the greatest advantage they could have hoped for. Dr. Anna Thompson rubbed her tired eyes as she reviewed the video feed from the Resolute for the 20th time. Captain Miller's message had arrived 3 days ago, and she hadn't left her lab since. The coffee cups scattered across her desk told the story of her dedication. Play it again, she told the computer, focusing on the moment when coalition weapons hit their own shields during the demonstration. The energy rippled in a distinct pattern, spreading out like waves on a pond. But there was something else, something in the way the shield matrix shifted on impact. The door to her lab opened, and General Peter Walsh walked in. "Please tell me you found something, Doctor. The brass is breathing down my neck about these aliens." Anna straightened up and pointed to her screen. "Look at this, sir. Every time their energy weapons hit the shields, the matrix realigns to absorb and disperse the impact. It's incredibly advanced technology. That's not making me feel better about our position, Thompson." "But that's just it," Anna said, her excitement growing. "Their shields are perfectly tuned for energy weapons. The matrix adapts instantly to any energy signature it detects. But watch this simulation." She pressed a button, and a new animation appeared. A simple metal slug fired from a railgun approached the coalition shield. The shield's energy pattern remained static, barely responding until the moment of impact. "Their shields are so specialized for energy weapons that they barely register kinetic projectiles," she explained. "It's like they've forgotten about basic physics in their rush to advance. A simple metal slug moving at high velocity could punch right through." General Walsh leaned closer to the screen. "You're sure about this?" "Positive. I've run the numbers 100 times. Their shields might as well be tissue paper against our railguns and coil guns. Even traditional bullets would be more effective than their fancy energy weapons." The general pulled up a chair, suddenly very interested. "How long would it take to upgrade our existing weapons platforms?" "That's the beauty of it," Anna said, pulling up another file. "We don't need to upgrade much. Our current technology is already perfect for this. We just need to adjust the velocity and mass of our projectiles for maximum effect. I've designed a new tungsten core round that would be devastating against their ships." Walsh nodded slowly, a smile spreading across his face. "And they're so convinced we're primitive that they won't see it coming. Keep this quiet, Doctor. I want as few people as possible knowing about this advantage." Over the next few weeks, Earth's military went into subtle but intense preparation. Ammunition factories increased production while maintaining their normal outward appearance. Ships were quietly upgraded with improved railgun systems, all while the coalition continued to send patronizing messages about helping Earth advance beyond its crude weaponry. At the weapons testing facility in Nevada, Anna supervised the first live-fire test of her modified railgun. The target was a replica of coalition shield technology, built from the specifications they'd so proudly shared with Earth. The gun fired with a thunderous crack. The heavy metal slug crossed the distance in a fraction of a second. The shield flickered briefly, trying to respond to the threat, but it was too late. The projectile punched through cleanly, leaving a perfect hole in the target behind it. The watching officials broke into applause. Anna just smiled, thinking of the coalition's laughter during that first meeting. Their overconfidence had led them to share far too much information, never considering that Earth's primitive technology might be exactly what was needed to defeat their advanced shields. Later that evening, as she prepared her report for General Walsh, Anna's computer flashed with an urgent message. Coalition ships had been spotted moving into aggressive positions near Earth's outer colonies. Their diplomatic messages were becoming more demanding, filled with thinly veiled threats about Earth's need to accept guidance from more advanced civilizations. "Let them come," Anna muttered, patting the prototype shell on her desk. "They're about to learn that newer doesn't always mean better." She sent a final message to all Earth's military production facilities. "Begin full-scale manufacturing. Priority Level 1. The coalition's laughter would soon turn to shock, and humanity's primitive weapons would teach them a lesson about underestimating their predecessors. The mood aboard the coalition flagship was tense as Ambassador Vram prepared his final message to Earth. 3 months had passed since first contact, and the humans' continued resistance to coalition guidance had become intolerable. He adjusted his ceremonial robes and activated the communication system. "People of Earth," he began, his translator converting his words to perfect English. "Your time for choosing has come to an end. The Coalition can no longer tolerate your primitive approach to galactic civilization. You will submit to our authority and accept our guidance, or face the consequences." In the United Earth Defense Command Center, Admiral Marcus Roberts watched the transmission with a carefully neutral expression. Around him, his staff monitored the positions of Coalition ships moving through the solar system. The alien vessels made no attempt to hide their movements. They wanted Earth to see their power. "Send our response," Roberts ordered after a moment's pause. The message was simple. "Earth respectfully declines your offer of guidance. We will maintain our independence." The Coalition's answer came within minutes. Their ships began moving into attack formations around Earth's colonies on Mars and the Moon. More vessels appeared near the asteroid mining stations. They were trying to intimidate Earth with their superior numbers and technology. In orbit around Mars, Coalition Commander Trell watched the humans' reactions with amusement. Their orbital defense platforms were so basic, simple metal structures armed with what looked like oversized versions of their primitive projectile weapons. His sensors detected teams of workers making modifications to these platforms, probably trying desperately to improve their outdated technology. "Poor creatures," he said to his bridge crew. "They don't even realize how hopeless their position is. Our shields will swat aside their metal pellets like insects." On Earth, military bases hummed with quiet activity. In underground bunkers, crews loaded the new tungsten core rounds into magazines. Railgun capacitors charged silently, their power levels carefully masked to appear lower than they really were. Every soldier and crew member had been drilled repeatedly on the importance of maintaining their appearance of technological inferiority. Dr. Thompson stood in the Nevada Testing Facility's control room, supervising the final calibrations of Earth's defense systems. General Walsh joined her, looking at the screens showing Coalition ship movements. "They're positioning exactly as we predicted," Walsh said. "Their tactical doctrine is as rigid as their technology. They have no idea what's coming." Anna nodded, checking the latest test results from the improved railgun rounds. "The arrogance of assumed superiority. They're so convinced their way is the only way that they can't imagine being vulnerable." In space, the Coalition continued their show of force. Their ships fired energy weapons in spectacular displays, their shields shimming with beautiful patterns of light. They broadcast every demonstration on open channels, making sure Earth could see what they would soon face. Captain Miller watched from the bridge of the Resolute as a Coalition destroyer passed nearby, its crew probably laughing at the primitive human vessel. His weapons officer, Tom Reed, monitored their new targeting systems, making subtle adjustments that the aliens dismissed as pointless tinkering. "Status report," Miller called out. "All weapons showing as outdated and inefficient, just as planned," Reed replied with a slight smile. "They're completely ignoring our primitive modifications." The Coalition's final ultimatum arrived that evening. Earth had 24 hours to surrender and accept their authority, or face immediate military action. They included detailed scans of their ships and weapons, apparently trying to show Earth the futility of resistance. Admiral Roberts gathered Earth's military command for their final briefing. The room was quiet as he laid out the situation. "The Coalition believes they're about to begin a simple police action against a primitive civilization," he said. "They expect us to either surrender immediately or be quickly overwhelmed by their superior technology. This assumption is their greatest weakness." He looked around the room, meeting each commander's eyes. "We've spent 3 months preparing while letting them think we're helpless. Every modification, every upgrade, every new weapons platform has been disguised as desperate, primitive attempts to catch up. They're about to learn that sometimes the old ways are the best ways." As the meeting ended, Roberts received word that Coalition ships were moving into their final attack positions. Soon, humanity would show the galaxy that progress wasn't always about abandoning the past. Sometimes it was about perfecting what already worked. The first shots of the war came at dawn. Coalition ships opened fire on Earth's lunar defense stations, their energy weapons lighting up the dark side of the moon like artificial stars. Commander Trell watched with satisfaction as the beams of superheated plasma streaked toward their targets. "See how easily we'll sweep aside their defenses," he told his bridge crew. "Their primitive technology cannot hope to." The rest of his sentence died in his throat. The lunar defense platforms, instead of exploding as expected, had taken minimal damage. Their supposedly primitive armor was absorbing the energy attacks far better than any simple metal should. "Impossible," Trell muttered. "Scan those structures again." Before his crew could comply, the defense platforms responded. There was no bright flash of energy weapons, no streaming beams of light. Instead, simple metal slugs accelerated by electromagnetic rails crossed the space between them at devastating velocities. The Coalition ship's shields flickered as their systems tried to respond to the unfamiliar threat. But they were too slow, too specialized. Tungsten core rounds punched through the energy barriers as if they weren't there, tearing into the ship's hulls. "Shields are ineffective," Trell's defensive officer screamed. "The projectile's air." His voice cut off as another round penetrated the bridge. Emergency force fields snapped into place as warning sirens blared. In Earth's command center, Admiral Roberts watched the battle unfold. "All stations, execute Battle Plan Alpha," he ordered. "Show them what our primitive weapons can do." Across the solar system, Earth's forces sprang into action. The Resolute, under Captain Miller's command, led a squadron of ships against the Coalition fleet near Mars. Their railguns spoke with thunderous silence in the vacuum of space, launching precisely calculated rounds at the unprepared alien vessels. "Look who's laughing now," Miller said quietly as he watched a Coalition cruiser's shields fail completely against the barrage. The alien ship's elegant design, optimized for energy weapon combat, provided little protection against physical impacts. On the lunar surface, defense platforms continued their relentless attack. Coalition ships tried to adapt, their crews frantically attempting to modify their shields. But they had no experience with kinetic warfare, no doctrine for dealing with simple physics applied with lethal precision. "This is impossible," Ambassador Vram shouted from his command post. "They're using primitive weapons. How are they penetrating our defenses?" The answer came in the form of another barrage. Earth's ships had moved into optimal firing positions, while the Coalition wasted time trying to boost their shield power. Streams of hypervelocity rounds crossed space in elegant patterns, guided by targeting computers that the aliens had dismissed as hopelessly outdated. Dr. Thompson watched the battle data from her control center, noting how perfectly the Coalition ship's shields failed against their weapons. "Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution," she told General Walsh, who stood beside her. They were so focused on advancing that they forgot to watch their backs. The Coalition attempted to regroup, to form defensive formations that might protect them from the brutal efficiency of Earth's attacks. But their ships, designed for long-range energy weapon duels, had no effective armor against kinetic impacts. Each round that penetrated their shields caused catastrophic damage. "All Earth forces," Admiral Roberts broadcast, "press the advantage. Don't let them adapt." The Coalition flagship, a massive vessel that had looked so impressive during their shows of force, now found itself at the mercy of weapons its crew had mocked. Multiple railgun rounds struck its command center, shutting down its primary systems. "Coalition forces, this is Earth Command," Roberts transmitted on all frequencies. "Your shields cannot stop our weapons. Your ships are not designed for this type of combat. Surrender now, or face the consequences of your arrogance." In the debris field that had once been the Coalition's front line, Commander Trell stared at his shattered bridge. Half his fleet was already destroyed or disabled, torn apart by the very weapons they had laughed at just days before. His own ship's shields, the most advanced in the Coalition, had proven useless against simple chunks of metal moving at incredible speeds. "Perhaps," he said to no one in particular, "we should have spent less time laughing and more time learning." The battle wasn't over, but its outcome was already clear. Humanity's primitive weapons had just changed the balance of power in the galaxy, and the Coalition's laughter had turned to stunned silence. The war entered its second week, and the Coalition's losses continued to mount. In their emergency command center on one of Jupiter's moons, Ambassador Vram and Commander Trell reviewed the latest battle reports with growing despair. Another fleet lost in the Mars sector, Trell reported, his voice heavy. Our ships just aren't built to withstand these physical impacts. We never thought we'd need to defend against such basic attacks. Vram stared at the tactical display, showing the movement of Earth's forces. The humans weren't fighting like a primitive species. Their ships moved in complex formations, using centuries of naval combat experience to outmaneuver the Coalition's more advanced, but less battle-tested vessels. They're not just firing blindly, Trell continued. Every shot is calculated. They're using our own momentum against us, predicting our movement patterns. It's like they've spent their entire history preparing for this moment. In the asteroid belt, Captain Miller's task force demonstrated exactly what Trell was talking about. The Resolute led a group of Earth ships in an attack on a Coalition supply line, their movements coordinated with practiced precision. Just like the old submarine warfare doctrines, Miller told his crew as they slipped between the asteroids. Silent running, calculated strikes, and a healthy respect for physics. His weapons officer, Tom Reed, had modified their railguns to fire in synchronized patterns. The Coalition ships, trying to maintain their elegant formation, made perfect targets. Their energy weapons splashed harmlessly against the reinforced hulls of Earth's vessels, while each kinetic round found its mark with devastating effect. Back on Earth, Dr. Thompson worked with her team to analyze captured Coalition technology. Their entire defensive doctrine is built around energy dispersion, she explained to General Walsh. They've got no concept of dealing with good old-fashioned momentum. Walsh nodded, watching a simulation of their latest weapon design. All those centuries of war on Earth taught us something they never learned. You can have all the fancy energy shields in the galaxy, but mass times acceleration still equals force. The Coalition attempted to adapt, trying to retrofit their ships with physical armor, but they had no experience with materials engineering for kinetic impacts. Their hasty modifications only made their ships slower and more vulnerable to Earth's increasingly sophisticated attack patterns. At a Coalition shipyard near Saturn, their engineers frantically worked to modify their shield systems. They managed to adjust the energy fields to better detect incoming projectiles, but by the time the shields responded, the rounds had already struck their targets. We're fighting centuries of combat experience, one Coalition scientist realized too late. While we focused on energy weapons, they perfected the arts of trajectory, impact, and penetration. Earth's ships pressed their advantage across the solar system. The Coalition's beautiful, sleek vessels proved to be glass cannons, powerful but fragile. Meanwhile, humanity's primitive ships, built to withstand physical combat, shrugged off energy weapon hits while delivering devastating railgun strikes. Admiral Roberts coordinated the offensive from Earth Command, using tactics developed over centuries of naval warfare. The Coalition never had to learn these lessons, he told his staff. They skipped the hard parts of military evolution, and now they're paying the price. In space, the evidence of his words was clear. Coalition ships, their shields finally penetrated, revealed hull designs that had never considered physical impacts. Each railgun round caused catastrophic damage, while Earth's vessels, with their thick armor and compartmentalized designs, could take multiple hits and keep fighting. They're retreating from the Jupiter sector, Miller reported back to Earth Command. Their formations are breaking down. They don't even know how to conduct an organized withdrawal under fire. The Coalition's mighty armada, which had arrived with such confidence, was being systematically taken apart by the very weapons they had mocked. Their ships, optimized for long-range energy weapon duels, had no answer for the close-range brutality of kinetic combat. As Earth's forces secured another victory in the outer solar system, Dr. Thompson put the final touches on a new weapons system. Sometimes, she told her team as they watched the test firing, The old ways are the best ways. We didn't stop using physical weapons because they were primitive. We kept using them because they work. The war wasn't over, but the momentum had shifted decisively. Humanity's outdated technology, combined with centuries of combat experience, was proving that progress wasn't always about abandoning the past. Sometimes it was about perfecting it. The Coalition's Emergency Council gathered in their last remaining base on Titan. Their grand fleet, once the pride of their civilization, had been reduced to less than a third of its original size. Ambassador Vram looked at the tired faces around him, all showing signs of their recent defeats. "We must adapt, or we will lose everything," Vram said, his translator struggling to keep up with his agitated speech. "Our shield modifications are finally showing some progress against their weapons." Commander Trell shook his head. "It's too late. While we spent weeks trying to improve our shields, they'd been developing new weapons. Our latest intelligence reports are troubling." On the screens behind him, images appeared showing Earth's latest deployment. Swarms of small, unmanned vessels filled space around their colonies. Each drone carried a scaled-down railgun, turning them into a cloud of mobile weapon platforms that could strike from any angle. In Earth's orbital shipyards, Dr. Thompson supervised the loading of these new drone swarms onto carrier vessels. "The Coalition thinks they finally figured out how to stop our main railguns," she told General Walsh. "They have no idea what's coming next." The drones were just the beginning. Earth's weapons labs had been busy adapting centuries of military innovation into space warfare. They had created new rounds that split into multiple penetrators after impact, turning a single shot into dozens of deadly fragments. The Coalition's improved shields couldn't track and stop them all. Captain Miller's fleet tested these new weapons near Neptune's orbit. The Resolute launched its first wave of combat drones, which spread out in formation like ancient fighter squadrons. When they opened fire, their smaller railguns overwhelmed the Coalition's defenses through sheer numbers. "Look at their ships trying to track multiple targets," Miller said to his crew. "They never developed point defense systems because energy weapons are too slow to need them. They don't know how to handle this many incoming rounds." The Coalition ships' improved shields could now stop some of the larger railgun rounds, but they were useless against the swarm tactics. Earth's drones attacked from all directions, their lighter projectiles slipping through shield gaps that the aliens hadn't even known existed. In their Titan base, Trell received the reports of this new assault. "They've taken our greatest advantage, our shield technology, and turned it into a weakness. We spent centuries perfecting defenses against energy weapons, never imagining we'd face an enemy who mastered physical combat in space." Earth's forces pressed their advantage. The drone swarms were followed by a new type of missile, carrying dozens of tungsten penetrators that dispersed just before impact. Coalition ships found their shields overwhelmed by hundreds of small impacts rather than single large ones. "Primitive weapons," one Coalition engineer said bitterly as he watched another ship fall to the swarm attacks. "We called them primitive because we didn't understand them. We thought progress only moved in one direction." Admiral Roberts watched from Earth Command as the battle lines shifted dramatically in humanity's favor. The Coalition's attempts to adapt their technology had come too late. Their ships were being systematically hunted down by weapons they had dismissed as obsolete just months ago. In space, the final phase of Earth's offensive began. Miller's fleet, supported by clouds of combat drones, pushed toward the Coalition's last stronghold on Titan. The alien ships tried to form a defensive screen, their modified shields glowing brightly as they attempted to ward off the attack. "Launch the splitter rounds," Miller ordered. The new ammunition shot from the Resolute's main guns, breaking apart into clouds of hypervelocity penetrators. The Coalition's shields, designed to handle single powerful impacts, couldn't cope with the dispersed attack pattern. Dr. Thompson watched the battle data from her lab, noting how each new weapon they developed exploited another weakness in the Coalition's defenses. "They thought technology was about abandoning the old ways," she said. "We knew it was about building upon them." The Coalition's remaining ships began to fall back from Titan, their formation broken by the relentless swarm attacks. Their once mighty civilization, which had looked down on humanity's primitive weapons, was being driven from the solar system by those very same weapons, evolved into something they couldn't counter. Earth's outdated military technology had proven that sometimes the old ways, refined and improved over centuries, could overcome even the most advanced innovations. The Coalition had learned too late that progress wasn't about forgetting the past, it was about learning from it. 3 months after the Battle of Titan, Captain Miller stood in the same conference room where the war had begun. This time, the Coalition representatives showed no sign of amusement at humanity's technology. Ambassador Vram sat across the table, his once proud posture now humble. The Coalition formally recognizes Earth as an equal member of the galactic community, Vram announced, his translator conveying genuine respect in his tone. We also request your assistance in developing better defensive systems for our ships. Miller exchanged glances with Dr. Thompson, who had been invited to join these final negotiations. The woman who had helped turn humanity's primitive weapons into the Coalition's nightmare now sat quietly, taking notes on future collaboration possibilities. We would be happy to share our expertise, Miller replied. Though I hope you understand why we'll keep some of our military advances to ourselves. Vram nodded quickly. Of course, we've learned the hard way not to underestimate Earth's military innovation. Our scientists are still trying to understand how your drone swarms coordinated so effectively. In orbit above them, Coalition engineers worked alongside Earth's technical teams, studying the damaged ships from both sides. The aliens were particularly interested in the layered armor designs that had allowed human vessels to survive multiple energy weapon hits. Your ships are built like the old sea vessels of Earth, one Coalition engineer remarked to Tom Reed as they inspected the Resolute's hull. We never considered using compartmentalized designs because our energy shields were supposed to prevent any impacts. Reed smiled, remembering their first meeting months ago. Sometimes the old solutions are the best solutions. Thousands of years of warfare taught us to never rely on a single layer of defense. In the Nevada testing facility, General Walsh watched as Coalition scientists examined Earth's railgun technology. Their faces showed amazement at the elegant simplicity of the weapons that had defeated their advanced shields. We became so focused on energy weapons that we forgot the basic principles of physics, a Coalition weapons expert admitted. All our advancement in one direction left us vulnerable to older, proven technologies. Dr. Thompson's team had begun working with Coalition shield specialists to develop new hybrid defense systems. They combined the aliens' energy dispersion technology with traditional armor, creating protection against both energy and kinetic weapons. The future of combat will blend the old and the new, Thompson explained to a group of Coalition engineers. Your energy weapons are incredibly advanced, but they'll work better alongside kinetic weapons, not in place of them. Admiral Roberts hosted a delegation of Coalition military leaders, sharing Earth's combat doctrines and centuries of tactical knowledge. The aliens were particularly interested in humanity's experience with submarine warfare, seeing parallels with space combat they had never considered. Your civilization's history of conflict gave you insights we never developed, Commander Trell acknowledged during one session. We thought we had advanced beyond such warfare, but instead we had just left ourselves vulnerable. In the following weeks, joint military exercises began. Coalition ships, now equipped with basic railguns alongside their energy weapons, practiced with Earth's vessels. The sight of their elegant ships using primitive weapons alongside their advanced technologies symbolized the new understanding between the species. Miller watched from the Resolute's bridge as a Coalition cruiser successfully test-fired its first railgun. They're quick learners, he remarked to his crew, once they got past their pride. The Coalition's defeat had led to an unexpected outcome. Instead of creating lasting enmity between the species, it had fostered mutual respect. The aliens had learned that progress wasn't always linear. While humanity gained access to advanced technologies, they could adapt to their proven methods. Perhaps this was the best possible result, Vrand said during the final treaty signing. Our arrogance needed to be challenged, and Earth's innovations needed to be recognized. Together, we will be stronger than either of us could be alone. The document they signed that day did more than end the war. It established a new principle in galactic civilization. True advancement came not from abandoning the past, but from building upon it. The Coalition's laughter at humanity's primitive weapons had turned into admiration for their wisdom in preserving and perfecting proven technologies. As the ceremony ended, Miller looked out at the combined fleet of Earth and Coalition ships orbiting above. The elegant energy weapons of the aliens now stood alongside the sturdy railguns of Earth, a testament to the fact that sometimes the old ways and the new ways were both part of the path forward.